Thank you. And there is a reason that the Vice President chose to come to Cincinnati. One, it's one of America's great cities. Second, what this city has done on transit, especially to come here. And Darrell and I have had these conversations. Darrell testified one of the first hearings I had as the new chair of the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. That committee has just generally been referred to as Senate Banking, but it was too much about Wall Street. Now it's about transportation. It's about housing. It's about civil rights. It's about the issues that I know everybody around this table cares about. And thank you for the chamber's involvement in transit, unlike in many ways more than any chamber in the country. So thank you for doing that. And the chamber's chamber's support for the advance in transit in this country was in this community was essential. Earlier this month, as I said, when Darrell testified at our transit hearing, I closed the hearing by asking him the last question, what transit means for people's lives, and his answer was just perfect in terms of how some people can't get home from work if they work late, if they don't have bus service, and many cities don't. Cincinnati now does it right, and it's because you all came together. So my pleasure to introduce Vice President Harris. She came here, she and I were here together in 2017. She then spoke at our annual women's conference in Columbus. She was so good and so well received. We were going to have her back the next year in Cincinnati, and then we were both called to session and didn't get to do that. But she has made such a difference as Vice President already. I want to tell one story before turning it over to her. We were talking one day about we had just returned to session in early February, late January, and we were sitting on the Senate floor, and we were talking about our Dr. King celebrations that she had been to in California and I had been to in Ohio. And we were talking about Dr. King's term that he used often, dignity of work. And she somehow, 3 days later, the next week on the floor, came up and handed me a book called All Work Has Dignity. It was a compilation of Dr. King's speeches to labor unions. And you all know Dr. King was killed fighting for workers, some of the most discriminated against workers in the country, sanitation workers in Memphis. And if I didn't already love Kamala Harris, I did after that discussion, just what we were talking about, dignity of work. And Dr. King always said, all labor has dignity. No job is menial if it pays an adequate wage. And that's so much of what she's fought for in her career and what has so mattered to her and so mattered to the people whom she serves. So, Senator Harris, Vice President Harris, good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. My friend Sherrod, thank you for everything that you do. Yes, I have traveled this beautiful state many times, actually, with your senator, and I will just say, whether the cameras are on or off, he is the same person. He is always fighting, in particular for the working people of Ohio, but for America, and you are a great national leader, Sherrod, Chairman Brown, so thank you for this. And thank you all for the time. So I look forward to getting into this conversation, but I'll put it in the context of also, again, back to the chairman. He chairs a committee in the United States Senate that is named Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. And I remember talking with the senator when he first took the chairmanship, and he said, people always refer to it as the Banking Committee. But the Housing and Urban Affairs part of that committee is equally impactful, if not more, in terms of the direct impact on working people. That's who the chairman is. And so when I think about the work that happens out of the United States Congress, the work we can do as an administration, I do think of it through the lens that he has talked about it, which is how are we going to have direct impact on working people? How are we going to improve the condition of their lives? How are we going to make it doable? Because sadly, that's at some point the goal, much less easy. But let's just start with making it doable. Can they raise their families, get to work, get to the grocery store, satisfy their basic responsibilities and functions to raise a family and to be productive in their community and in their lives? And so that's the context in which I think about this very important subject, which is the subject of public transit. And, when I think about it, I think about good transit equals vibrant communities. right? So if we think about it in terms of an investment in public transit, it is an investment in job creation. It is an investment in improving communities. It is an investment in increasing access to opportunity. Literally, if there is a bus line that is within, and a bus stop that is within walking distance and not half a mile from someone's house, what that means in terms of their ability to have access to the job that may be miles away from where they live. And often it is the case for working people in America that they cannot afford to work where they live, and they need to then travel some distance. And it shouldn't require that you have the financial ability to own a car, pay insurance, pay for new tires to be able to go to work. So I think about public transit in that context. I think about it in the context of what it means for a working parent to be able to take her children, to take his children to school, and not have to walk long distances or figure out some other way to get a ride from somebody to take one's child to school, especially the youngest of our children. I think of it in the context of the fact that in so many communities, sadly, we are still at a place where we talk about food deserts, where we talk about the unavailability of grocery stores that sell fresh food, much less fruits and vegetables. And people have to travel distances. Well, our public transit allows that to happen. It is that basic and that essential. And then let's think of it in the context of what the pandemic did. And in the midst of extraordinary loss, we also saw the pandemic as an accelerator in that it highlighted and for so many people illuminated long-standing fissures and failures in our systems. And it highlighted the importance on this point of the importance of public transit, where so many of our first responders, our healthcare workers, our home care workers, relied on public transit to get to work every day, to continue doing the work, which was about saving lives, often the lives of people who were perfect strangers to them. I think about it in the context, and the president talks about this. He talked about it a couple of days ago at the meeting of the joint session of Congress about good jobs. Good jobs. And the jobs are about the jobs that will include growing the infrastructure around public transit. The good jobs are the jobs about all of the folks who work to make public transit work, including a wonderful leader that we talked to before we walked in here. It's about what we're going to do in the American Jobs Plan, $110 billion, that's with a B, for transit agencies, $85 billion to modernize and expand transit, and $25 billion to electrify transit buses, something that we talked about here, Mr. Haley. And then there is the last point that I'll make about transit being good for public health and the climate, because that means a lot of folks can get on a bus, and those folks then are not driving. And we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We are reducing emissions that are harmful to our climate. It is about what you're doing here in Cincinnati, and it's happening around our country, and the American Jobs Plan will help grow that exponentially, which is also the creation of electric vehicles and electric transit, public transit. Mm-hmm. So there's so much good work happening here and happening around our country as an extension. And let's continue to invest in public transit in America, understanding that it's about supporting working families, it's about supporting our infrastructure, our economy, and our public health. So with that, I will turn the mic back to the chairman so we can begin our discussion.
Thank you again. President. Let me introduce each of the, she chose to come to Cincinnati. I chose the five of you to sit and talk with her about transit. And when you come to talk infrastructure in Cincinnati, you talk from transit to the Brent Spence Bridge. Yes. But today it's mostly about transit. So Daryl Haley, whom you've already met, CEO of Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority, has been innovative, working with the business community and all of us. Eddie Cohn is head of the Cincinnati Urban League, relatively new CEO here, great service to this community already. Troy Miller is head of the Transit Union. His workers sort of are the definition of essential workers, people who expose themselves to this virus every single day. And they have stood strong and continue to serve this community. Professor Mehta teaches urban issues at this great university, University of Cincinnati. Thank you for the way you weigh in. Joe Meyer, longtime friend of mine, who's head of the Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber really stepped up to make this, to help modernize this transit system because they understand all this. So I will just begin to ask each of you a question, and the Vice President obviously can weigh in with comments or further questions. And Troy, far too many of your workers face the dangers at work of exposure to this virus, especially over the last 13 months, and then the anxiety of coming home, knowing the potential that they potentially infect their families. Talk to me about the dignity of work and your transit workers and what they face every day and what you as the union are able to do for them.
So here in Cincinnati, we have roughly about 800 members total. 1/8 of our membership was positive in the last year. That's 1/8. You know, that's a lot. Yeah. And we had some that spent time in the hospital in a long period of time. So we've had to deal with a lot. And with the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration, we were fortunate because you enforced masks at the beginning of the year. The previous administration didn't want to do that. And we dealt with that issue because people would get on the buses coughing. And in the circulation of the buses, there's nowhere to go. It's a bus. And it's right there in the ventilation. You just keep getting it. So it's been rough. It's been a challenge for our people over the last year. Daryl and myself, we sit down and worked on a lot of issues, scheduling, changing schedules, try to make it better for the employees. It's been a challenge. So it's been tough. And I will say the American Rescue Plan was great because you know, $75 million came to Cincinnati, you know, because of this. So it's been a challenge here in Cincinnati. It's been, you know, going home with your families, dealing with it. It's been tough. And you're always worried what you're going to take home. And this is not just here. This is internationally, too. Yeah. We had 151 brothers and sisters across the United States pass away. Wow. So, and it's staggering, and I'll give you some numbers. Over 4,700 members were infected in the United States. Over 3,000 laid off, or currently still laid off, ATU members. And then at one time we had 20,000 laid off, you know, in the United States. So it's devastating. This whole virus has been devastating for us. And with your leadership and President Biden's leadership, the both of you, it's been great. And now we see the American Jobs Plan coming, and it's making it exciting for us. Because now we're seeing, you know, things that you guys are investing, because the infrastructure piece is huge. Not only did we just pass a tax levy for the first time since 1970 here in Cincinnati. That's the first tax levy we've passed in 1970, so we can grow the transit. And then now this American Jobs piece comes on top, which one of the things we're really excited about, I was talking with our international, I found out, is some of the things you guys have worked on in this bill is the new green buses. Yeah. And actually putting language in there to train our mechanics. Because too many times I've seen people lose their jobs because they get farmed out because they don't want to give their training to the department or the place. So I'm happy to hear we got good union jobs, not being contracted. We're going to help you keep our jobs here, grow. This is exciting for us. So I'm excited to have, you know, the Biden-Harris administration working on all the things you have, and with the challenges we've dealt with the virus. And I know there's challenges still moving forward. We still, you know, deal with it, and we'll probably deal with it for a while. Now, and with this, we're excited we was able to help people ride the buses for free to go get their vaccination. So that was something good we did here in the city. And they did it actually in the state of Ohio.
Troy, talk about what the Vice President and I have talked about this before, that we want to, one of the goals of the jobs plan, the infrastructure plan, and in our long-term but really medium-term efforts are to replace 60,000 diesel buses with mostly diesel buses with 60,000 zero-emission buses. Understanding you have a whole lot of mechanics in Local 627 that are trained to work on diesel buses, diesel engines. Talk about that transition. And talk about what your members are saying about that, understanding that people aren't going to get laid off, but they're going to be retrained during this process over the next several years.
Yeah, so my background is actually maintenance. So this is exciting to me because you can go get that training and keep that. I would love to see the ATU be one of the leaders in that training across the United States. I'd love to see that because this is very important. Protecting our people, protecting our jobs. Because so many times I hear, you guys ain't qualified, we don't need you. And it's not just here, it's all over. And it is a very big importance to have that knowledge and training and keep the jobs here.
How many of your 800 workers, how many of your 800 members are mechanics?
Roughly about 200. We have 200 maintenance employees between all the divisions. So
you should know, and you probably do, in the American Jobs Plan, we actually do have substantial money set aside for training. And knowing that organized labor usually has some of the best apprenticeship and training programs available and taking full advantage of that. But, and in addition to that point then, can you talk a little bit about what it has meant for your members to be part of a union while they have been going through these challenges and the sacrifices they have made? And by the way, please thank them on behalf of the President and me for the work they've been doing and the sacrifices they've made to do that work.
Well, we also thank you for being having our back to fight these issues. They help us on these issues. It's been challenging because it's just you never know what you're going to get the virus or not. You're dealing with it. And we did sit down. We did change schedules and we did change hours and we spent a lot of time. I joked around with Daryl one day. I said on Saturday, I said, I didn't know I was going to be doing management work, writing schedules. And on Saturday, I wrote a schedule for maintenance. So yeah, it's been a challenge to help our workers to get it done safely and make it right for everyone.
That's great.
Madam Vice President, again, thank you for coming to the Queen City, to our great city, and to hear the wisdom, the collective wisdom of the five of them. Thank you, and why don't you close out? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this has been a very insightful conversation, and I have taken copious notes. But I think that what this conversation has revealed are the many dimensions, and therefore the many people in the various capacities of their lives, how they are impacted by public transportation. And we can start with the workers, and the fact that they are essential workers, and by the way, should not be sacrificial workers. And that means understanding what they need in terms of being in the workplace in a safe environment and giving them the support that they deserve, as well as the chairman and I always talk about, recognizing the dignity of that work and the value of that work, and recognizing it in every way, including pay and benefits. It means understanding the significance of, and Mr. Cohen, you said it so well, we have to pay attention to racial equity, because to not is to neglect the reality of the need to pay attention to racial inequity based on long-standing inequities. But thinking of it in terms of also the opportunities, be it for Mr. Haley in terms of what you're doing with this transit authority or the Chamber of Commerce, and what this can do in investment in public transit that is about job creation, building up the economy, building up productivity, building on the cultural institutions of a community, which always have an impact on the well-being and the quality of life of any community. Access to arts, access to sports, access to those things, and hopefully that are public spaces, Professor, that create a quality of life that every person should be entitled to receive. The points that you've made, Professor, about public spaces, I think, is so important, and I really appreciate the point that you were making also about thinking of the realities of sidewalks, street lights, as being part of the transit ecosystem. If that parent, if that mother or father can't walk that stroller because the sidewalks are uneven or falling apart, and she's got a child in a stroller and a toddler, well, that's going to mean that will take at least twice as much time for her to get up, get down, and hopefully have somebody help her with the stroller to get to the bus stop. Lights, and what that means in terms of the safety for both the workers and the folks who use the system. So I think this has been an incredible group to really highlight all of the facets and all of the relevancy of an investment in public transportation, which again, infrastructure, and the chairman and I have talked about this. Infrastructure, you know, it's a fancy word for just how do you get to where you need to go? That's really what it's about. How do you get to where you need to go? Hopefully without struggle and with some level of ease, because usually where people need to go is they need to go to work, their children need to go to school, they need to go to the grocery store, they need to go to the place where they worship, they need to go to a sports game from time to time. So I appreciate you all for this conversation and all the work you do, and I plan to highlight it. And of course, the President thanks you for the work that you are doing as a great model for what our country will and can do. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you again.
Thanks very much, Kamala. Thank you.